Maradona once stopped mid-game, stood still, and clapped for an unknown Brazilian kid. That kid's name was Denner. He dribbled like Ronaldinho before Ronaldinho even existed. He was faster than Neymar, sharper than Ronaldo, and yet most of the world has never even heard of him. His story is one of genius, chaos, and heartbreak, and you're about to find out why Brazil still calls him the god of dribbling. So listen to this. In 1986, Denner was just 15. He'd already lost his father, and he'd quit football completely just to help his mom pay the bills. But that same year, a massive futsal tournament was announced in his neighborhood. And this wasn't some tiny local event. It was live on TV, 7,000 people in the stands, and scouts everywhere. Some Champions League clubs don't even get that kind of attendance today. Schools were sending out scouts to find poor kids who could play for a few bucks. And that's how they found him. They offered him a scholarship, except Denner never showed up for a single class. They were basically just paying him to play futsal. And from the first match, everyone knew this kid was different. When he had the ball, defenders froze. He didn't dribble, he danced. The crowd started chanting his name. By the time the final came around, he wasn't just a player anymore. He was the main event. And here's the wild part. Denner knew how good he was. Before every match, he'd refuse to play unless they paid him more. 15 years old. And already negotiating like a pro. By the time the final kicked off, this kid was making more money than grown men with real jobs. And he didn't just win that tournament, he destroyed it. Every trophy, every award, all his. That performance caught the attention of big clubs. Sao Paulo, Palmeiras, and his childhood love, Portuguesa. He chose Portuguesa, but they quickly realized something. Denner wasn't a polished academy kid. He was pure street. Some nights, he didn't even go home. His family would only see him at matches, just to make sure he was still alive. Stories spread about him stealing boots, fighting on the pitch, even skipping training. And then one afternoon, police stormed into practice and arrested him for armed robbery. He spent 2 nights in jail before the club begged for his release. They promised to keep him out of trouble, but Denner didn't see it as a second chance. He saw it as proof he could get away with anything. Despite all the chaos around him, when Denner stepped onto the pitch, everything else disappeared. It was like football itself bent to his rhythm. 2 years later, Portuguesa were drowning in debt. They refused to give Denner a professional contract, even though he'd been playing with the first team for 2 seasons. So Denner, being Denner, came up with a plan that was either genius or insane. He faked an entire transfer to Belgium, drove all the way to the airport, pretending he was leaving for good. Suitcases, goodbyes, everything. The club president panicked and gave him the contract within hours. And that's when Denner showed them exactly why he was worth every cent. In one Paulista Championship match, he picked up the ball deep in his own half, dribbled past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defenders, and scored what's still called the greatest goal in Portuguesa's history. His teammate ran up to him, eyes wide, asking, "What did you just do?" Denner just shrugged and said, "Stop acting dumb. I score goals like that every training session." That moment changed everything. The media exploded. Fans couldn't believe their eyes, and soon, the Brazilian national team came calling. On his debut, Denner was so excited, he ran onto the field before the referee allowed the substitution, then had to awkwardly jog back and do it again. But when the whistle blew, the magic returned. He'd been on the pitch barely 6 minutes before dropping deep, stealing the ball, and starting the counterattack that led to Brazil's equalizer. It was only a glimpse, but everyone watching knew they were seeing something special. But then, the media turned on him. He missed a crucial match after injuring himself doing motorcycle wheelies. Yeah, wheelies. And when Brazil's under-23 team failed to qualify for the Olympics, they blamed him. Even though that squad had Cafu and Roberto Carlos, Denner became the scapegoat. But the truth was, his talent was too bright, too wild, to fit in a system built for order. But the headlines weren't celebrating his genius anymore. They were filled with stories about a car covered in bullet holes that he drove to training and a knife he once hid in his sock. That's when the newspapers gave him a name that stuck forever: the brilliant vagabond. 2-time World Cup winner Pepe tried to defend him, saying, "In terms of raw talent, no player has ever come this close to Pele." But even that couldn't fix his image. So Denner knew he had to start over. He left Sao Paulo and joined Vasco da Gama, a club big enough to change everything. It was his clean slate, his shot at redemption. His debut against Newell's Old Boys. And on the other side of the pitch, was Diego Maradona. Everyone in the stadium came to see Maradona's comeback, but within minutes, all eyes were on Denner. Just 6 minutes in, he took the ball, 1 defender gone, 2 gone, 3, 4, 5, all gone. He didn't even score, but the crowd was already on its feet. Maradona stood there, hands on his hips, just shaking his head, watching this kid dance with the ball like it was part of him. And after the final whistle, Maradona walked straight into Vasco's locker room, looked around, and said, "Where's the kid?" He wanted to shake Denner's hand.
And of course, Denner couldn't help but brag. "Did Maradona ever ask to meet any of you?" he said to his teammates. Didn't think so. Even years later, when one of his teammates joined Newell's, the locals still talked about that night. The night a 23-year-old Brazilian stole Maradona's spotlight. It was funny though. Denner always said, "Sometimes the dribble is more beautiful than the goal." And that night, he proved it. The Vasco fans fell in love instantly. Soon, their chants echoed across Rio. "It's Cafuné! It's Cafuné! Denner is a mix of Garrincha and Pele." He was unstoppable. And Europe was finally calling. Stuttgart had just agreed to pay $3 million to bring him to Germany. It should have been the start of his new life, but instead, it became the beginning of the end. But that dream ended before it even began. 3 days after signing with Stuttgart, just 16 days after turning 23, Denner was in Sao Paulo, finishing contract details. He already had his plane ticket for the next morning, but at midnight, he suddenly decided he couldn't wait. He had to drive back to Rio that same night because he didn't want to leave his all-white Mitsubishi Eclipse behind. His family begged him to stay. They told him to rest, take the flight, be careful, but Denner wouldn't listen. He called his friend Otto Miranda, a man with a dangerous past, and together they hit the road. Before leaving, Denner called his best friend, Edinho, Pele's son. They'd been close for years, but this one was different. Denner kept saying how much he loved him, how thankful he was. And Edinho swears to this day, Denner's voice sounded like he knew something terrible was about to happen. At 5 in the morning, with Rio just 20 minutes away, Otto fell asleep at the wheel. The car drifted off the road and slammed into a tree. It should have been survivable. Otto broke both legs, but he lived. Denner didn't. He had reclined his seat too far back, and when the seatbelt locked, it crushed his throat. He choked on his own blood before help could arrive. Cameras reached the crash before the paramedics did. The image of Denner's lifeless body, covered by newspapers, was broadcast across every television in Brazil, and just 13 days later, Ayrton Senna died at Imola. It was the darkest month in Brazil's sporting history. That's how much he meant to Brazil.
Those who saw him play never forgot what it felt like. Watching Denner was like catching a glimpse of a shooting star. Beautiful, rare, and gone too soon. And maybe that's what makes his story timeless. Because in every barefoot kid weaving through defenders on a dusty pitch in Sao Paulo, you can still see flashes of Denner, the god of dribbling. And somewhere out there, maybe he's still playing. Maybe he's still smiling, making even the heavens applaud. Because legends, they don't really die. They just change stadiums.